Good afternoon and welcome to our fourth session of the day. My name is Czamara Newton and I lead the DA audit team here at Lloyd. The world has changed drastically since our last Lloyd's audit conference held on the 4th of March 2019. I remember this day very clearly. Having just joined Lloyd's team, it was indeed an eventful first day in my new role. Fast forward to today, and sadly we cannot meet each other in person. However, we can proudly say that thanks to the power of technology, we can meet again in the safest possible way, both for us as well as our planet. Thank you for joining this session and being part of this event. We hope it won't be too long before we see you in person. In the first part of this afternoon session, I will talk through Lloyd's audit team's response to COVID-19 and our most significant projects delivered in 2020. I will also reveal results of the Lloyd's remote audit survey. If you wish to learn more about it, all survey reports have now been published on this platform under this session's Result tab. In the second part of the session, I will be joined by our guest panelists to discuss and analyze the survey results in more detail. By the end of the session, delegates will have an opportunity to ask questions via the Slido Q&A function. The learning objectives set for this session aim for delegates to name challenges and opportunities of the delegated authority auditing in the time of the global pandemic, to understand the results of the remote audit survey, and to further identify main advantages and disadvantages of remote auditing, and finally, to gain clarity of what the future best practice of remote auditing might look like. 2020 challenged us in a ways we could have never imagined. We have met all challenges with strength and battled the fear of the virus. We also had to embrace full-time remote working, homeschooling, social distancing, lockdowns, and the grim reality of global pandemic. We had to temporarily adjust our approach to life and work. However, our mindsets and the way we look at the world have changed forever. We can proudly say that we have embraced the change the best we could and successfully delivered all DA audit projects planned for 2020. In March, Lloyd's audit team issued first response to COVID-19 and offered guidance on how auditors and the market should continue with the ongoing audit schedule. We have requested to follow closely a recommendation of each national government to ensure safety and well-being of all parties involved in the audit process. Lloyd's further supported the use of technology during remote auditing and requested from managing agents a targeted, risk-based approach to remote audit scoping. To access the latest guidance, please visit lloyds.com website and search COVID-19 Information Hub. It is expected that further updates to the COVID-19 response on audit will be published following on from this conference. In June, following months of consultation and market trial, the Lloyd's Auditor Certification Project has been completed. The Lloyd's Bulletin has been published and the process officially started from the 1st of July 2020. We currently have nearly 50 certified audit firms on our centralized panel. In July, following an extensive market consultation, system upgrade has been deployed via the Delegated Audit Manager platform. This latest release significantly streamlined the end-to-end audit process and became a key milestone which contributes to Lloyd's vision of a single, seamless, delegated authority ecosystem. In September, utilizing the improved system functionality, the entire end-to-end audit planning for 2021 had been processed and recorded in DAM. Furthermore, the 2021 scheduling process has been completed 4 weeks faster than in the prior year. Finally, in October, to complete the auditor certification requirements, automated audit rating functionality was added in DAM, allowing managing agents to provide auditors with direct feedback on the quality of audit reports and overall auditors' performance. Lloyd's audit team engaged throughout 2020 with all stakeholders involved in the coordinated audits and offered support with remote process. Nearly 550 assignments, including large and complex coverholder and DCA coordinated audits, have now been delivered remotely in 2020. However, Lloyd's audit team have also witnessed some challenges in achieving remote audits. In order to gain more insight and allow the audit community to voice their experiences, in December 2020, Lloyd's issued a market-wide survey asking a set of questions on the topic of remote auditing. Following slides will be providing a summary of main findings across all 4 surveys completed by auditors, managing agents, cover holders, delegated claims administrators, and brokers. Thank you to all participants for taking time to complete the surveys and providing an insightful feedback. Results presented today are based on responses from 178 entities that have fully completed the submissions. This translates into an overall feedback gathered across hundreds of both coordinated and solo audits that took place in 2020. As per the visual presented on the screen, overall profiles of the respondents match the typical audit coordination profile, with participating entities being spread out globally and across all business sizes, with small and medium businesses being a majority. Nearly 30% of respondents stated that they've managed a delegated authority audit via a designated audit team. Majority, however, oversee this function alongside other responsibilities, which in the time of pandemic have proven challenging for some businesses and contributed to less efficient audit delivery. 100% of respondents experienced remote audit in 2020. This, however, shapes slightly differently prior to COVID-19 pandemic. Please note the stats presented on the left-hand side of the slide. Majority of auditors and managing agents delivered remote audit previously. In contrast, on average, only 30% of brokers and cover holders DCAs experienced remote reviews prior to 2020. Limited number of assignments delivered last year were mixed of remote and on-site visits, and as expected, over 90% of audits had been delivered end-to-end remotely. We will now focus on some key questions included in the survey. Let us start with the timeframes of remote audits. As seen on the slide, majority of auditors and managing agents experience delays in completion of their assignments. On average, an assignment has taken 2 to 4 weeks longer to complete than initially anticipated. In contrast, only 30% of cover holders DCAs and 40% of brokers notice delays in the remote auditing. This difference is assumed to be due to auditors and specifically managing agents having to complete additional steps in the overall audit process that are not applicable to others. Those are scoping and post-audit action monitoring. Over half of our respondents couldn't pinpoint a specific part in the process that was delayed, but agreed that overall the entire end-to-end process took longer than initially anticipated. This feedback will be reviewed in more details during the upcoming panel discussion. The second key question was around the overall experience of remote auditing. Only 2% of respondents stated that they have been dissatisfied with remote process, with majority embracing this new way of auditing. Most suggested improvements across all participants were as follows: a need to communicate proactively and managing the delays more efficiently in the future, introducing and embracing technology that allows remote access, and finally, a need for an engagement and remote audit support by all stakeholders involved in the process. The third key question we have asked was with the view to establish if respondents would accept remote audits in the future. Nearly 100% responded yes, with added comment that once the pandemic is over, perhaps a combination of remote and on-site reviews would be a preferred option. The next key question is specific to managing agents only. As managing agents are the risk carriers and are responsible for planning, instructing and completing the annual coverholder DCE audits, it was important to understand the potential impact of remote audits on the quality of reports and audit outcomes. Reassuringly, 92% of respondents stated that they were satisfied with the quality of the audit reports received in 2020. The final key question is again specific to managing agents only, and it is addressing the overall audit cost. Both the quality and the cost of audits are of significant importance to markets. As we can see from the table presented on the slide, the overall audit cost was mostly unchanged in 2020, and in some cases, it has decreased. The decrease is assumed to be connected with the lack of travel expenses. This question will also be further reviewed during the panel discussion. One of the main aims of our Lloyd survey was to identify key challenges and opportunities that remote auditing brings to the DA process. We have asked all respondents to name, in their own words, main disadvantages and advantages of remote auditing. The survey reports published on this platform provide the delegates with a comprehensive summary of hundreds of comments submitted via the online survey. For now, however, the following two slides present an overview of the remote auditing key disadvantages and advantages, highlighting the most frequent themes across all four reports. Top 3 disadvantages of remote auditing were named as technological limitations, higher risk of miscommunication, and longer end-to-end process. Let's look at each in more detail. Technological limitations. From comments submitted through the online survey, it is clear that remote audit success is hugely depending on the adequate level of technological sophistication of the auditor and coverholder DCA. Issues with inability to provide access or providing inadequate access or inability to upload documents safely appear to be witnessed on the number of audits. Higher risk of miscommunication. Communication can be affected by lack of instant and direct access to relevant individuals or teams. Some respondents stated that person-to-person interaction can produce a better communication. Some managing agents commented that there was not enough proactive communication from some auditors, and audit delays were not reported promptly. longer end-to-end process. This refers back to the question discussed earlier around remote audit timeframes. Majority of respondents agreed that reviews conducted in 2020 took longer due to multiple aspects, such as a sudden need to switch to remote work, a challenge for businesses with paper files, COVID-19 related staff absences, and additional pre-audit work for both auditors and cover holders, DCAs, when setting up the remote access. Remote auditing became our new reality, and without a doubt, it had its challenges. However, after nearly a year of carrying this process globally and with over 500 audit assignments completed remotely, we cannot deny the apparent transformation that is taking place within the delegated authority audits. With enhancements in technology and in a paperless environment, remote auditing is a positive step forward, and for majority of respondents, it would appear to be the path of the future. The survey results evidence remote audits that have proven to be time and cost efficient, to offer flexibility and ability to target and focus the review. Significant amount of respondents pointed out that one of the main advantages of remote audits is lesser carbon footprint, a benefit of most importance and relevance in the ongoing global climate change discussion. Furthermore, remote working proves for some to be less stressful, allowing less travel time and more balance between work and life. Finally, some audit firms look at the ability to conduct audit remotely as a way to diversify and expand their existing talent pools. This is the end of the first part of the session. Thank you for listening, and I trust you have found it to be of beneficial update. There will be an option to ask questions at the end of the session, and you can start submitting your questions now via the Slido link visible on your screens. Now I invite you to the second part, where the survey results and future of DA audits will be discussed. Please join our panel discussion next. Thank you. Welcome to the second part of our afternoon session, the panel discussion. With me in the online studio are our panelists. Although they are, I'm sure, well known to our audience, let me start with a brief introduction. During today's discussion, the markets are being represented by Ian Ranking, DA Audit Manager at Tokyo Marine Kiln. Hi, Ian.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Kate.
Lucinda Wright, DA Audit Manager at Brit. Hello, Lucinda.
Hello, everyone.
And Juliana Contento, DUA Manager at SCORE. Hello, Juliana.
Hello, hi, everyone.
Ian, Lucinda, and Juliana are members of the LMA and the market-led Delegated Authority Audit Group. All three also manage audit teams responsible for a significant number of Lloyd's annual coordinated audits. The auditors community is represented today by Mark Taylor, Managing Director at 10 Stone. Good afternoon, Mark.
Hello, everyone.
10 Stone delivered remotely a number of our most complex and sizable UK cover holder audits in 2020. We also have in studio John Davidson, Head of Global Audit at Vuity. Welcome, John.
Hi, Kate. Hello, everyone.
John's team had delivered significant number of coordinated audits across all locations in 2020. Next up, we've got with us Lana Dury, Head of Audit North America at Vuity. Hi, Lana.
Hello, everyone.
Hiya. Lana successfully led in 2020 a number of logistically challenging and sizable remote cover holder and DCA audits across Canada and the US. Next one up is Amy Louise Bad, Delegated Authority Review Manager at Mazars. Hello, Amy Louise.
Hello, Kay. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Mazar's team has a well-established record of delivering coordinated audits both in the UK and in the number of European locations. We also have a guest panelist with us today representing non-DA auditors, Dan Mellows. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Kate. Hi, everyone.
Hi. Dan is a director within the financial services at Mazars and leads the UK insurance internal audit practice. Welcome to you all. And before we start our discussion, I just wanted to say a big thank you to our panelists for giving up the time over the past weeks in preparation for this event and for joining us today. Thank you. 2020 brought a crisis like no other and will be remembered as a year where everything has changed. However, in many aspects, the COVID-19 pandemic has not only brought a need for change, but also showed us the new way forward. We have heard a great deal of feedback on the DA remote audits. But before we discuss this further, let's hear from our non-DA colleagues first. They have, like us, experienced the struggle of pandemic and remote auditing throughout the 2020. It will be a great opportunity for us and the audience to hear their perspective on future of independent reviews and process innovation beyond COVID-19. Dan, hello, and welcome again to our panel. Great to have you here with us today. Dan, please, could you tell us how you and your team had to adapt to COVID-19 challenges? I would also wanted to know, did the pandemic reshape in any way your future strategy, push for process innovation? And if so, what changes have you made and why?
Thanks, Kate, and thanks for having me here today. I'm very pleased to say that our work in internal audit has carried on largely unabated, and this has largely been reflected by the feedback from the DA community as well. We were fortunate; we had been operating a hybrid model to some extent anyway, where large elements of our work were being performed remotely. The difference here is, of course, that this was being done from our office and not from our homes.
Yeah.
The immediate action, excuse me, that we took was to speak to each of our clients to understand the challenges that they were facing in the immediate short term and to reappraise their audit plans on that basis, particularly in light of any changes they were making to their processes as a result of remote working conditions. This resulted in certain tactical changes, but thankfully nothing fundamental. I say nothing fundamental. The insurance industry, as you will all well know, has proved itself to be incredibly resilient through this process. BCPs worked, which is fantastic news for our clients. And, you know, we count ourselves lucky. We're providing a regulated service to regulated entities. People couldn't really turn the tap off internal audit as it's a regulatory requirement. So, and we needed to carry on working to ensure we were giving management boards via their audit committees the assurance that they needed in a timely fashion. And of course, that allowed our clients to report back to the regulators accordingly. Going back to the tactical changes, which I mentioned, the main changes were in relation to reprioritizing our plans as opposed to ripping them up and starting again. There were three particular categories that these fell into. One was around cyber risk. Obviously, we all moved into remote working overnight. Cyber risk, the hackers, if you will, the troublemakers out there, it was a message to them to get busy, if I speak frankly. So cyber risk went up. So there were many cases where we brought forward planned cyber reviews to do them sooner so that we could give that assurance to the audit committee. So these would include things like penetration testing, social engineering, which are reviews where we effectively replicate hackers' techniques of manipulating abnormal behavior through social media, picking up the phone, giving away information, that sort of thing, and also just the standard IT health checks that we were doing. The second category is really the anti-financial crime controls, reviews. So particularly focusing in on financial controls around, for example, payments and expenses, to make sure that in the remote working environment, key controls weren't being circumvented. And the third one, going back to the point I made earlier, is around where changes were made to processes, therefore increasing inherent risk. We had Teams pre-lockdown, but were we using it to its full capacity? Absolutely not, and I don't think anyone was. I think it's fair to say that it's come into its own since then. So whilst there have been some inefficiencies, again, reflecting the results of your survey, some audits have taken longer than planned, but we haven't encountered any insurmountable challenges. We have been able to deliver the scopes we wanted to deliver. Due to the secure electronic transfer of information, which we were doing anyway, but something which we'll be doing much more often, and that's screen sharing, running through processes with our client staff, identifying key controls, etc., etc. And on top of that, there have been clear benefits to all of this. We can actually attend multiple meetings in a day, particularly where we're working on various clients. And that creates great inefficiencies because you don't have to travel between different locations in between. And I'll come on obviously to the future strategy in that regard. But I did want to just kind of give a word of caution in all of this. Whilst there are benefits, we are social animals at the core of it, and there's no substitute in my mind to being in another's physical presence. I don't think I ever appreciated how in the past you actually feed off one another's energy when you're in the room with them. Teams fatigue, we've probably all heard the term. Yeah. Zoom fatigue, call it what you will. It is kicking in. I've experienced it, and I think many people on here will have experienced it. So moving on to the future strategy, it has made us rethink. We were having weekly initially webinars across the whole of the UK firm, and I distinctly remember our COO kind of saying, it won't be the same again. And I think we all know that. We will never go to a pre-COVID world, for better or for worse. And I think it's important that we focus on the key benefits that we have experienced, whilst not forgetting all the great stuff that we did before. So I think the hybrid approach is going to become more embedded. That's the way I see this panning out. And I think our clients now are much more understanding that we can actually be much more efficient, service them better if we are doing some work remotely and actually not impinging on their time as much as maybe we had to in the past, or we thought we had to. And I think that's the main thing. I don't think there's any overhaul here, but I think just being very aware of the challenges that are faced by all of us in a remote working environment, and not seeing this as now BAU, but also recognizing those benefits.
Thank you so much, and that's very insightful. Thank you for sharing with us. And before I basically pass this question to our DA auditors, it might be a good time to check in with the audience and hear what they have to say on the topic. Over to you, Sam. Can we go through the live polls now?
Of course, yeah. So just a reminder that you can access the polls on the right-hand side of the screen, or you can go to slido.com and enter number C179. So you should see the first question up there. Can we make the 2020 pandemic a turning point in the DA audit? So if you just want to submit your answers there, and we'll see what comes in. Give it a few more seconds. We've got a lot coming in. That's good. It's looking like a very strong lead on yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam. And I think we've got one more question.
Yeah, so that should appear now. Okay, so the question is, what would be your preferred approach to audits in the years to come? So you've got fully remote, hybrid, which is a mix of remote and on-site, or on-site only. Let's watch those come in. Great. a very strong lead as well on this one, which is for hybrid, so remote and on-site.
Thank you, Sam. So obviously echoing Dan's comment as well on the hybrid going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience as well for participating. And I know that you are dying to share the basically your comments with us. So over to our DA auditors. Lana, over to you first. Can the 2020 pandemic be a turning point in DA audit for auditors?
Thank you, Kate. Yes, we definitely agree with the poll that was taken. I think we've gotten on really well in North America for 2020. Auditing remotely wasn't something that was necessarily new to our team. Having to switch from mainly performing on-site to performing remote and working from home had its challenges for sure. More so in the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic than coming now into a new calendar year. While we didn't have any audits that were canceled for the year, there were a handful of deferrals. These deferrals were due mainly to two factors that I think we have to, continue to consider during the 2021 calendar year. The most common for us finding that the cover holder or the DCA's inability to provide an external party with remote access to their underwriting or claim systems. And, getting that remote access, whether it was due to unwillingness for us to join onto their systems, uncertainty surrounding the sharing of the data and safe sharing of the data, or just not having the systems access in place. And we saw this predominantly with the early Q2 2020 audits as everyone was gearing up to work remotely themselves. We also had instances of it being deferred due to illness. In Canada, we have, and in the United States as well, we have a lot of instances with cover holder and DCA's key staff either having COVID-19, caring for someone at home with COVID-19, or having lost somebody due to the illness. So approaching somebody to carry out an audit when key staff are going through that, and of course the office and their family office going through that as well was a big adjustment. When we sat down to complete the Lloyd's 2020 remote audit survey, the conversation of how it's going that we were having in March of April 2020, was very much different, but shared a lot of the same commonalities as how it is going in December and coming into January. It was much more positive as the year went along. We reflected on the 8 or 9 months that we had been auditing remotely, and I can say that we're massively proud of our team. There's a lot of struggles that needed to be considered. In some way we had members of our team that were lacking the social interaction, even though we had an electronic social interaction. It wasn't the same as that in person that they needed, whether they were living alone. The other contrast is, families at home and continuing to work remotely, continuing to, require audits to happen while we're sitting in situations with lack of childcare. School closures for younger and for older children, families that have those. That was a difficulty we had as well. We're managing to get through it though, even with all of our challenges. One of the questions that was in the survey that we were asked is about the length of time it takes to deliver an audit. And at first it did take longer to deliver an audit than first anticipated. Mainly the delays that we saw were in setup and access to the system. We feel that the turning point for us was really once we had our own processes in place to guide and direct the remote audits, essentially telling the holders and the DCAs, this is how your audit is going to carry out, both in scheduling and being there with them to troubleshoot access and making sure we were all comfortable with the data that was being shared, whether it was being through a screen share, whether it was being access to live data or access to files that were sent through to us through a secure method. Now we've not had any, recent instances of key members of cover holder and DCA staff being available due to illness or due to family obligations, but those things do still come up. So we have to be able to appreciate that as well. Overall, we're seeing that the remote audits are taking, less time to do than they were at the beginning of the pandemic, but it is still taking, we get kind of excited when we do have an instance where it takes as long as it did to complete it when we were doing the traditional on-site format as well. So it is taking longer. Another factor for us here in North America was travel time. And I know that, work-life balance was spoke about previously. Sometimes, some weeks we would lose an entire day to travel in North America. Now having that extra day back is really helpful to us carrying on the business and keeping up to date with our work. We will continue to adapt to the way that we carry out audits in 2021, whether it continue to be 100% remote, whether it be some hybrid method, or whether on-site audits, do come back when it is safe to do so. Much of North America still remains under curfew, shelter in place, interstate and interprovincial travel restrictions. So carrying on remotely for the time being, is necessary. The current downside for us in Canada is not being able to escape a cold Canadian winter by planning an on-site audit in a nice sunny southern location.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you very much. And I echo as well your comments about remote audits. This is a preferred option as well. And as I said in my presentation, we will be updating our COVID-19 response. And for the time being, remote audits is the preferred way forward. Right. So thank you very much, Lana. Let's just hear from Mark. Mark, do you share Lana's views? Do you have anything else to add from the UK perspective?
Absolutely. I think the first thing I would say is, people should be congratulated for getting through this. I don't think if people were able to look forward, they'd have realised what could be achieved without a lot of big preparation. I think auditors and cover holders and TPA should be applauded for how they got through this process. There have been challenges, obviously. But I think the can-do mentality that's been represented across the market is something that should be reflected. It is a turning point. We're not going to go backwards now. We know that remote audits can be done, and they can be done very successfully. I think the key thing from my perspective is that we focus on making them a success. I don't want to see a situation where remote audit is seen as a light version of normal audit. We have the technology to do this. We've been doing these audits for a number of years, and we know that we can do them properly. We should be learning from our experiences and making sure that that we can treat these as a success. There is obviously a desire in the market to treat these as or to do these audits in a hybrid format, and that makes a lot of sense. I think there are going to be some situations where that isn't always the case, but I think the predominance is now that this is how it will be going forward. As I say, I do want to make sure that we learn from our experiences. There were huge technological challenges in some cases, and we should be really trying to focus on those issues and resolving the market to give us better access as auditors into cover holder systems. As I say, I don't want remote audit to be seen as a weaker version of audit. There's no reason why it should be. So, but I think, and yes, we did have some delays. I think the lack of sophistication in some cases of a lot of cover holders, but also some cases the over sophistication. We had people with very sophisticated systems, but we weren't allowed to look at them. It kind of defeated the object, really. So I do want to see us learn, build on this experience and improve.
And that has to be done collectively, right? So we all have to work on it and communicate and make sure that obviously those audits are effective. I do agree. Amy-Louise, anything that you would like to add on this topic?
Not really. I mean, I agree with both Mark and Lana. Our experience has been really similar. We've had a lot of people that were up for the challenge. We haven't had many deferrals, but the length of audits has been significant in comparison to what we did previously. 2020 was a turning point. However, I don't think it's the best example of how things are going to be going forward. Like Lana said, we had lots of illnesses, lots of people that were really unprepared for exactly what a remote audit was and how it could work. And we have really done the full scale of audits, from, you know, screen sharing, file sharing, sitting on camera one-to-one with the cover holder or the TPA for the entire length of the audit. But overall, it's worked and it's been really good. Everyone's really pulled together. So it's been a really positive experience for us. But yeah, I think the hybrid audit is definitely the way forward. And I think, you know, especially when changing auditors from one year to another, a site visit is always a good thing to do if you can. But there are a lot of territories that we travel to that perhaps we don't need to anymore. And that's definitely a benefit, as Lana said, for that work-life balance. But apart from that, I echo everything that they've said.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy-Louise. And I think it would be good as well to hear on this from the managing agent point of view. Ian, over to you. Is the 2020 pandemic a turning point for managing agents within the DA audits?
Thanks, Kate. For me, definitely. I know auditors have managed fantastically over a difficult period, adapting without any notice. But if you think around the managing agency world, our world was turned upside down overnight. We weren't regularly working from home. So overnight, we had to be flexible enough to manage that change. And I have to say, I can only talk personally at TMK, but I believe the market has managed this fantastically well. There was so much going on, but the process doesn't seem to have failed in any particular way. The survey results see that out. They were well received by cover holders and DCAs. It's interesting to note, I think the survey, if I read it right, 73% of those parties had never had a remote audit. That's a big sea change, and we're probably going to see that again this year and into next, depending on when we can get any on-site physical visits undertaken. So we have to bear that in mind. The guys prior to me have all intimated it's a common theme. The survey results sounded it out. Cover holders, DCAs felt that auditors didn't have the right technology, and vice versa. I think as a market, the managing agencies we need to take that away and look at how we can put that straight earlier in the process, get things lined up. Communication is obviously key. There's some subtle changes we can make, as well as the technological ones, to improve this process. But if anyone had asked a year ago, would we be able to do this, I'd have said never. It's fantastic achievement to see what has been achieved, and say with very little negative feedback on the quality reports from my analysts. So in the main, the standards have been retained. The auditors have worked so well in ironing out the issues with cover holders and DCAs, and with everyone, as Lana mentioned, with illnesses and difficulties of working around the working life. We are where we are, and I do see this as taking another year, possibly two, to finalise. The hybrid model has already been spoken about. I think there's a couple of versions of that. There's a part on-site, part remote on an annual basis, but then you could have 2 remotes and one a third year on a 3-year cycle physical. So there's varying ways of looking at it. As a market, from innovation perspective, there's not just cost benefits, there's streamlining the processes, there's things we always strive to improve. I think there's improvements that definitely can be made here that will set us on the right path going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. And Juliana, did you change your process in any way because of the remote audits? Is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yes, well, I think I echo everything I've been hearing and has been said by my colleagues. So definitely 2020 has been a challenging year for everyone. But overall, I have to say 2020 audit process for us did go quite well. We had just very few occasions where our intervention was required. But definitely, I think we are looking at ways to address the issues that have come out of this experience. And I think mainly it will be around communication management, also with the auditors, and maybe delays in communicating with us if there were any issues with our cover holders. But I think also that one of the main triggers for delays that we have experienced was down to the technological possibilities of some of the entities that we were reviewing. And I think this is something we need to address at source. So we are looking to embed our due diligence and onboarding cover holders program to look at them from a risk-based perspective, because one size doesn't fit all, and especially from an IT and technologies perspective, this is true, and this is something that we are working in channel since some time now. But hopefully this experience will also help us to drive in the right direction and to work more closely along with our IT teams, but as well to be able to confront ourselves with the cover holders and people that work in the IT environment, or people that maybe when the IT and the technologies are outsourced, I think we really need also to engage with those external people to be involved not only at due diligence process, but as well during the course of the audit, especially when it is remote, because there will be administrators to the IT technologies, to the system that are used from an underwriting perspective, and hence we need to engage with the right person. But also I think as there have been instances where a cover holder were on paper files, and this has obviously caused delays because information was not readily available. So I think one of the first questions in our due diligence review would be that our cover holder must be on electronic filing. This is quite important.
Thank you, Juliana. Thank you, panelists. I think we've heard a lot of insightful comments and very important points to note. We will move to the next topic of the discussion, and I would like to refer back to our remote survey results. The survey showed that the cost of audit remained unchanged, and managing agents agreed that they are satisfied with the report's quality. However, the end-to-end remote audit process took longer last year. And I think we've touched on this already. Definitely there was quite a lot of issues last year related to pandemic that made that process longer. But I would like to really discuss as well, are there any additional obstacles that we need to consider? If so, would implementation of new approach, perhaps a new remote audit strategy, be required across the market? Before I give the floor to our panelists again, let's hear from our audience first. Sam, over to you, please.
Great, thank you. So the poll is now live on the right-hand side, or in Slido if you're in that version. Just a reminder of the question: would the D8 audit process benefit from issuance of Lloyd's remote audit process best practice? So we'll just wait for your answers to come in there. Great, lots of responses. They're coming in nice and quick. That's good. Okay, so we've got about 85% would say yes to that question.
Thank you, Sam. Interesting results. Let's just pass this on to our DA auditors. John, I would like to hear from you. So clearly the audience is saying that there is a need for a best practice, possibly a collective work between managing agents, Lloyd, Sam, obviously auditors. Would you be changing the way you do your audits? Would you be changing your strategy? And if so, in what ways going forward?
I think we were fortunate that we performed remote audits before, but the remote audits we performed pre-COVID were always planned to be remote audits. So they tended to be DCA audits, and DCAs do like to have systems that allow access. You know, they will sell their services to the managing agents that the managing agent can dial into the system, so we could access their systems directly. And when an audit is always planned to be remote, everyone's going into it eyes open. I think what we found last year was a lot of the audits that were planned to be on site suddenly became remote audits overnight. And the struggles we found last year were in coming up with a way to get the audit done efficiently for our clients that gave them the best possible product. Now, some of those audits still were as efficient as we'd been on site, because large cover holders, brokers, or DCAs still gave us access to their systems. So other than, you know, as Lana said, saving the travel time or saving the expense or saving the environment, we would perform the work as we had done before. Rather than sitting in the DCA or the cover holder's office, we'd be sitting at home. The other area that we benefit from, as Ian mentioned, is most of the audit firms are already set up to work from home. It tends to be an agile environment that we're working in. We don't tend to sit in an office in the city or in Sydney or in Toronto writing our reports. We tend to be home-based part of the time anyway. I think going forward, I think we've developed over the course of the last 9 months to a year, we've developed a better process for, as Lana said, proposing to the cover holders or the DCs how the audit's going to be run in order to be as least disruptive as possible for the cover holders. You know, cover holders want to be disrupted as little as possible, and a way that we can get through, we can work around people's diaries, get the audits done. What we need to be is disciplined in you know, we don't have a flight booked on a Friday or a train booked on a Friday, so we have to get the work done. What we can find is, if we're asking for information, the cover holders of the DCAs, there's never the same sort of urgency to get it to us before we leave the office, because we're not in the office. And we found some of the delays were caused by having to go back time and time again to collect the information. And one of the big delays was, as Lana mentioned, just working out how it was going to be done, because some of the firms would have access to a thing called Dropbox or a share file site or a work share or sharing on Teams or Zoom, and there are security implications for all of these. And I think most of us have worked a way that we've come up with our method of securely transferring data, of however that may be, making sure we can see what we need to see to perform the audit, making sure we can perform the interviews correctly. But I do think going into this year, I think Ian's right. You know, we're still going to be coming up across cover holders and DCAs and MGAs who haven't been audited remotely before, and it's going to be a learning curve for them. We'll be in a better position, but it's going to be a learning curve for them. And I think something formalized, and I sort of I like to caveat that with, you know, how easily it's going to be to implement it on some of the smaller cover holders, but that'll be for other people to think through. But I think a standard method for remote audit that is, you know, backed by Lloyd's, backed by the managing agents, and supported by the audit firms and brokers, I think would help us.
Fantastic, thank you, John. And Lucinda, over to you. So from the managing agent point of view, would a kind of guidance best practice be helpful for you and your team going forward and when dealing with the remote audits?
Yeah, I think definitely agree that it would be. I think as managing agents, we do have a responsibility to make sure that with our DCAs and our cover holders, that they are set up to be able to cope with remote audits. We've had instances where we have asked and they've said, yes, that's fine. But actually, when it came to it, they weren't actually aware of what was required for them. So we need to think about our due diligence. We need to think about questions we ask onboarding and at renewal to make sure that everybody who has that relationship with us is fully set up to carry out a remote audit. Also, I think we need to work really closely with auditors, as John was saying, that there's not that sense of urgency if you're not in the office to make sure that you attend a meeting, you send over all the information that's required. So we need to work really closely with auditors to make sure that they're getting the information they need so things don't take longer than they have to. But yeah, absolutely agree that we do need best practice guide.
Perfect. And that's something that it was initiated by the Delegated Authority Audit Group. There will be a subgroup that is going to look into it with the representation from the managing agents, auditors, with the support from Lloyd's. I would like to initiate the final point of our discussion by a poll question. So, Sam, over to you again. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. So it should be coming live on the right-hand side shortly. Okay, yeah, so the question is, some of our survey respondents stated that it's difficult to assess the entity's culture remotely. If you agree with this statement, please name what exactly about the culture cannot be assessed when auditing remotely.
So, Sam, we will probably leave that question just to give the audience time to think about it and then submit it, because obviously it's not just one word answer. But I felt that that's quite interesting, and I know that some of the panelists were quite interested to hear the feedback. Dan, can I ask you from the non-DA perspective, is it really that hard to assess the culture remotely? Or is it just the kind of, old habits that you have to be in a room with someone to read them?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, this one. You don't get the feel for the culture. So I guess it's that really soft stuff. So, call it coffee machine conversation, the stuff that you would normally just sort of see being in an office environment or being in a client environment for us. However, I guess from an internal audit perspective, we, culture and us assessing our clients' culture falls firmly within our remit. But we tend to do that through cultural indicators. Internal audit remains an evidence-based discipline. That's not to say we can't share other sorts of cultural indicators with our clients and feed them back if we think they're of note. But it tends to be through cultural indicators which we can measure. So, risk and control culture based on, timely closure of internal audit actions, for example, management's responses to our findings and the completeness, timeliness of management responses, planned actions, that sort of thing. But again, that's very much focused on risk and control culture and not the culture more broadly. I think it's still possible, but I think you definitely lose an element of the richness of a fully rounded assessment that you might be able to make if you're actually physically present.
Thank you, Dan. And Amy Louise, I know that this point is quite of interest to you. Is there anything that you wanted to add on this?
I think the only thing that I'd want to add is, if culture is a concern, what elements of culture, I guess, do the managing agents think that we should be picking up? Because yes, when we go on site, we do pick up a lot about the company culture, but there's a huge amount that we can pick up remotely, even before we, even back to the on-site audits, things that we could pick up about the staff and their working practices, the communication between teams. We can really see that quite easily. But I think that's one of the things that would definitely be a concern for someone who's doing all their planning, doing all their prep work, and going on site to audit. They might miss that process. But perhaps for a larger audit firm that's got somebody to sort of deal with those emails, and you've got multiple people doing one audit, maybe more gets picked up. But I think from a Mazar perspective, we'd really want to hear lots of lovely feedback about, what should we be picking up? What do you want us to? Because we very, very rarely find any findings about the culture. And when we do, they're a real one-off, and we would always pick that up as like a real separate point.
So yes, we are having quite a lot of feedback coming through. It's probably something that we will have to review afterwards, but a lot of comments on body language. Body language and kind of reading the office atmosphere. I suppose that's one thing that obviously you can't do remotely. But then very often what I hear from the auditors that when you do on-site audit, you are still in a very small room. You don't have that ability either to probably read the office. So I don't know if this is specific to remote audits, but we will review that feedback. We will take it. There is quite a lot coming in. So I will ensure that the subgroup will look into it, and Emily, we will share it with you as well. I think that is it from the panel discussion. I want to make sure that we've got enough time for a live Q&A session. Panelists, thank you so much for your comments. And Sam, over to you. Do we have any questions coming through?
We have a lot of questions coming through.
Oh,
yeah.
Fantastic.
So just a quick reminder before we start that you can enter your questions in the Q&A box on the right-hand side, or pop to slido.com and enter C179. You can also enter a question there. So we'll start with the most popular question that we've got on the Q&A. One of the issues with remote audits is that cover holders will not grant auditors access to their systems because of IT security. What would be Lloyd's response to this?
I'm just going to go through the question again. Sorry, Sam.
Would you like me to read it again?
If you don't mind, yes.
Yeah. So one of the issues with remote audits is that cover holders will not grant auditors access to their systems because of IT security. What is Lloyd's response?
Yes, so we had certain situations in 2020 with basically IT security, but that's something that is, it needs to be definitely referred to the managing agents and discussed between the auditor and the managing agent. Also, I think it's just basically understanding the IT security and the concerns of the cover holder. I think we've heard from Lana and others that it's important to explain to the cover holder and the DCA what is the process, what steps are going to be taken, what security the auditor has. And I think this is very important because auditors are prepped to do those audits, and if the cover holder has got any issues, I'm sure that it can be addressed. I think it's just the communication and addressing those issues in advance, which is important. And our response to COVID-19 under the Information Hub states that if there are any issues, we would like to hear about them, and the auditors and cover holders can refer them to Lloyd's and the auditor and the managing agents.
Great, thank you, Kate. So the next question, have any of the managing agents on the panel taken any follow-up steps with cover holders, DCAs that refuse to receive remote audits?
Ian, Lucinda, Juliana, anyone wants to answer? Ian, perhaps?
Thanks, Kate. I have to say it's been very limited that we've reached that point. I can only cite one case where we had a party that wasn't open to a remote file access review due to system restrictions. They were quite a large DCA, and after a few weeks of pushing, we didn't actually get involved that heavily. The auditor did most of the work, but we made it clear that the audit had to go ahead, given the nature of the business that was being audited in light of the pandemic, if I give you a clue there. And it did open up and access was finally granted. There's the alternate curve on that, where you've got small cover holder relationships who are not geared up for this. They haven't coped particularly well, and there's an argument that we will only ever be able to physically visit them for audit. And the question then is, how long are you prepared to wait? Now, if you're lucky enough to have a good history of audit with that party, you probably know them inside out. You know them well enough that you can allow a deferral. Ultimately, you have to look at your partners. Lucinda and Juliana have mentioned that, you know, onboarding will be a perfect route going forward about our existing partners. And I think as managing agents, we'll need to take that away and possibly look to those parties and communicate with them around the time that we're lining up the audit to make sure they have the capabilities, or at least they're thinking about it. And if they don't, what steps we need to take to work around that. So I think that there's no definitive answer. I think we have to take each case on its merits. But there's definitely been some delays through that, but nothing that was insurmountable.
And Ian, would you engage your underwriters as well on this? If there are any issues, would you have those conversations before the binder renewals?
Yeah, I think that's a route to take. So we haven't come across anything that was that difficult that we couldn't get what we needed, or we haven't got a plan. But yeah, definitely underwriters could be involved. I think it's a very difficult situation because no one was prepared for this. So how long would you give the cover holder or DCA to get with the program, if you like? And I think it would be unfair if, you know, you've got a small operation that produces good business into Lloyd's, has done for a number of years, but maybe is, you know, a couple of 3-man band or whatever, and they haven't got the technology. You have to question whether you want to push business away from the Lloyd's market for that, for the reason of no remote access, or you find an alternative means of getting to deal with that audit.
Thank you, Ian. Sam, do we have any more questions?
Yes, we do. Yeah. So what are the main factors that have contributed to those cases where audit costs have increased? There's a comment about it being counterintuitive. So any comments you have on this?
So increase audit costs. Could we have an audit firm responding to it? Have you experienced a situation where you had to increase your costs?
Yes.
Kate, I could.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go. You go, Mark.
Okay,
I was
Mark?
going to say, yeah. I mean, we definitely have had those situations. You know, we had a situation recently where someone was only letting us use a test system, and that happened repeatedly, and it significantly increased the time we had to spend on the audit. I think that we need to sort of really address this issue if we don't want these costs being fed back into the process. You know, we've recognised with audits are taking, in terms of actual man hours, you know, 5 to 20% more time. And you know, we don't want those costs to pass back to managing agents, but we are businesses, and that will happen if they aren't addressed. I think the big issue is firstly systems, but the second issue is really getting the cover holders and the DPAs to respond to queries. I know it's a point that's been made, but it really does add to the time it takes to finish these audits and the quality of it. And if we don't do that, those costs are going to get passed back.
Thank you, Mark. Lana, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so that's been something that has come up, you know, just within our internal group, comparing from region to region, where we're globally. We have just in North America done about 50 to 60 audits remotely in COVID-19, and none of them have had increased costs. For us, when we're saying that things do take longer to get done, it's sometimes that we would have a 3 or 4 or 5 hour delay, or sometimes a whole day delay in waiting to get information back that we have to push for, but we're able to keep busy with work, other work during that time. For us, when we're quoting, you know, we quote a fixed fee, the budget is the budget, and, you know, that is what goes through. I think that especially in the North American market, more so than in the UK and Australia and in Italy, where their travel costs aren't a huge part of the audit. I think if anything, the North American market, the cost to do an audit has significantly decreased for the managing agents just due to us not charging for travel costs. And that's something that we would be conscious with in the future as well, if high method is what's spoken about as coming into eventually the preferred method as the regions open up. You can significantly reduce the time on site, significantly reduces the expenses as well. But from a fee perspective, we have not had one single instance where we have put up our fee for a managing agent because of an audit going over.
Thank you, Lana. Sam, I think we still have 5 minutes left, so a little bit more time for probably 1 or 2 questions. Do we have any more?
Yes, of course. Yeah, we've got a couple of popular ones. So first of all, have audit firms incurred increased cybersecurity and insurance costs from moving to remote audits? And then just the second part of that, are MAs open to increased fees to accommodate? I can read again if you need me to.
So again, we'll probably have to pass it on to the audit firms. Perhaps Amy Louise, any comments on that question from you?
I was actually going to defer to Dan, if that's okay, because he probably knows a little bit more about it than I do, and it's not something that's directly affected me as much.
Dan, over to you, please.
I'll do my best. Are we, sorry, just to understand the question fully, are we referring to extra costs that we are incurring as a result?
Correct, as an audit firm, yes.
I think it's probably one for, sorry, I'm going to defer it again. I think it's one for the DA audit firms, perhaps the smaller audit firms, because I don't think there's been any significant change in the cyber controls that we've had in place. We're a sizable organization, and we're global. So we have already had pretty strong cyber controls in for some time. I'm sure there have been changes behind the scenes, but not ones that I would necessarily be privy to or certainly have been involved in. So forgive me, Kate, I'm going to struggle to answer that one.
Fair comment, absolutely. So perhaps, Mark, yeah. Thank you.
There are some products out there that we've been using and trialing that work really well in terms of helping with that risk, so that people can sort of securely post their information into a common data space. And these are fully approved products. So there are solutions to this. We've certainly not had sort of, I'd say, what I would call genuine cyber risk. I think but there is a risk if people are continuing to just sort of trade information by email. I think then this is back to the kind of where we move forward post-COVID with this whole situation of the standards that the market has in terms of what people's capacity are for sharing information, and really and truly getting on my high horse. We as a market need to be taking a survey now in terms of what knowledge we have of our cover holders and their capacity to share information, and that should be something that we've got recent knowledge. We've just finished effectively almost a full year of this. Why not farm this information and have this MI so that we can then deal with those cover holders that are really struggling, and we can then get access to their systems or work with them to build products. This will help everybody if we go down this path. We've all had good experiences, we've all had not so good experiences, and let's just help them focus on those companies that need the support, really.
So from your perspective, Mark, did you have to increase your cyber insurance kind of limits, and or have you invested in any specific type of systems since the remote audits? Or
yes,
I think that
as I say, we bought a new product, and it's working really well for us. It takes a little bit of education for the staff and for the cover holders and the TPAs to use it, but once they're comfortable with it, it works really well. The only thing that we've incurred, which is probably the same with everybody, is the cost of PI insurance. So that's gone up for
yeah,
everybody.
because I suppose that's something that the subgroup can consider as well. At the moment, under certification, the cyber insurance is not required, is the PI insurance amongst other policies. So perhaps something that we need to take on as well and just decide if that will be in addition to the existing requirements. Thank you, Mark. I think we are just about to finish our session. Well, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to the audience for participating, for all the questions. And as I said, we will definitely review the feedback received through the polls, and we will be taking the survey results and today's discussion further with the DAG subgroup. And I'm hoping that we can create a best practice and publish this very soon to the markets. Thank you very much. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chloe. Goodbye.
Thank you,
very
everyone.
much, Kate. Well done.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Perfect.